Okay, so now it is time for the Q&A. And I think it's probably worth starting with the issue raised in that poll, which is how people sort of make it a practical business solution rather than a theoretical solution. So I don't know if you've got any sort of examples that you can give our audience on that.
You have a go.
Okay, all right, yeah, you throw me in. Okay, throw me in. So absolutely, I mean, certainly in the, it's maybe premature to say kind of in the early days of SOA because we haven't been trying it for too long, but certainly if I look back 3 or 4 years at organisations we were speaking to who were really at the leading edge of this, many of them were very keen to leap into the technology without really taking a bigger view of what was required. And you know, we came across a number of companies who would loudly and proudly proclaim, we've built 3,000 services. Great. Does anyone care? Is anyone listening? And the answer is probably not, actually. It's far better to produce 5 services if those are of real value and they're going to be used in multiple places to gain consistency. I think in terms of practicality and getting started, the frame for discussion has to be, like Simon said, it has to be what's the strategic imperative that we have in IT? And what's the mix of pressures we have? Is it about rationalization? Is it about flexibility? Is it about a mixture of the two? What's driving us? And that, if as Simon says, what you can do is get permission to think more broadly, maybe not for a long time. I mean, we've come across organizations who've done very valuable kind of architecture exercises in just a few weeks. It's not months and months of people locked away in a dark room somewhere. If you can get the bigger picture of the context for IT work, then what you can do is start to say, well, in this business area, what we really need to do is rationalize our systems. And there you've got a clear rationale for saying, right, there's a few key services we need to architect and we need to deliver in quite short order to enable that rationalization to proceed. Otherwise, we're just going to be inventing stuff that nobody really needs. So in terms of practical steps, the challenge is, I think, that where I've seen this really succeed is it has to be a mixture of top-down and bottom-up. Yeah. There's no doubt that you can't just have a load of people noodling and saying, oh, I think we should build services over here and over here and over here. That has to be connected to the work that the guys on the ground are doing. But equally, you can't have just the guys on the ground going and playing with the funky tools, many of which are free, and just right-clicking on existing application components and turning them into web services, because that does no one any favours. You have to try and work in teams so that you are bridging a top-down view, more of a strategy-led view, and a bottom-up view where people are actually down and dirty with the tools and with the problems they're facing day to day from a support perspective. That's just one view. There's many other things to say, but do you want to build on that a bit?
I think you're right. It's all too easy just to increase the operational cost by 15% by making everything a service. I think the question that I've asked more often that's moved things on when we've had workshops has been, what is it you can't do today for the business? And often the IT department have had to really think about this because, especially the older businesses, the business is so intimate with the applications, they tend to just ask IT to modify things, integrate new things. But IT then going away and saying, well, what is it we can't do for the business today? What windows of opportunity do we miss just completely because we can't react quick enough? By the time we've got the kit in, by the time we've changed that application, it's gone. We've just missed the opportunity. And that then tends to drive out the prime projects that really should be the first to be done in a service-oriented fashion to move towards this architecture. But that one question, what is it you can't do today? Because I often get IT departments that come in and they try and say everything's fantastic. I say, well, you don't need us then. Everything's great. They say, well, we can't do this for the business. We can't change our processes quick enough. We can't get the customer information. It's got to be business driven. If it's not, then it is just an IT love-in, and people get to put SIR on their CVs, and not a lot else happens.
I mean, just to quickly come back on that, coming back to the question you raised there, Abigail. You know, what's likely to drive people, tip people over the edge into making the start right now? If, as in the poll, they like the idea but they can't see how to apply it. You know, if I look at where organisations have seen most success, the kinds of scenarios that seem to play out really well are at the edge of the organisation. I think typically it's where the organisation needs to interact with customers or partners or suppliers, because that's where there's a lot of pressure to change things more quickly, be more flexible. And particularly at the customer end, you've frequently got challenges around what people might call multi-channel service delivery. So let's say an insurance company, they work through telephone sales, they have branches maybe, they have brokers, and they have internet. And one of the big challenges is, how do we serve customers consistently across all of those channels? That kind of scenario tends to be a very, very good fit for SOA types of projects, because you've got the need for flexibility. There's clear reuse mandate there, because you're trying to deliver the same kinds of capability in multiple ways to multiple audiences. And there's a clear focus from the business. Typically, business guys in sales and services and marketing are saying, for goodness sake, we've got to get more efficient and effective at how we deal with our customers and be more consistent. So you've got the perfect storm almost of a mandate from the business, need for flexibility, clear opportunity for reuse. That's a real sweet spot, I think.
Yeah. Another example we had was with a utilities organisation, and essentially it was very price sensitive. So they were selling oil, and they couldn't really differentiate themselves on the price, but they could differentiate themselves on what they let their customers do, so they could trade their own oil and things like this. And essentially what happened, the board met once a quarter and said, we want to give this level of functionality to our customers. Now IT then had to run away and make that happen, but it was all band-aids and sticking plasters. And what IT was very aware of, each month they're building the spaghetti up to a higher and higher level, where one quarter they would turn around and say, we just can't do it. And they knew they had to get more intelligent about the way they were building and reusing functionality instead of just building it incrementally.
So you'd say that perhaps starting with a small project is a good place, even though you are talking about a big change, maybe an example project, a demonstration of what you can do to really get people to see how it would work, and then building from there?
Yeah, definitely. But it has to be something that has a business benefit. Too many people start with an IT project and it stays an IT project. Unless, as I said before, you're delivering business benefit and you're cleaning up the back-end infrastructure, it's really tough. And the other thing is, you can start with a small project, but you've really got to be conscious that unless you get it to an enterprise-wide endeavour, it will fizzle out after one or two projects. You won't get the buy-in, you won't get the governance you need to maintain the momentum behind the initiative.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, taking the idea of SOA into a little bit more complex area, if you're, say, outsourcing some of your IT provision, how do you manage that between internal and external provision? It could potentially be quite complicated for companies. What would you advise there, Simon?
If I start, again, it comes back to keeping the brains inside the organisation. You know, so having a clear strategy is absolutely key. If you have a good reference architecture, a good strategy, actually there's a lot you can outsource, but remain in control of your own destiny. If you define services appropriately, you can outsource the construction of those services. But the key thing to maintain in-house is control of the overall strategy that you have. So I think there's a lot more possibility to outsource a lot more. But don't outsource your brains. Work closely with a partner if you have to, but retain control over that. So if you've only got a small department, you want the really clever people who can really look after that strategy. Don't know what your experience has been like, Neil.
Well, there's two aspects to it, I suppose. It depends what's being outsourced. So if you're talking about outsourcing development, then absolutely, I think I would have nothing else to say. Where there's an additional wrinkle is if what's actually being outsourced is application management or even business processes. And there, the additional wrinkle is you're needing to integrate systems which span not only your own organisation, but also the processes and applications you've asked someone else to look after. Clearly, there's challenges there around identity management, security, reliability, quality of service. The good news is that actually, technically speaking, there's nothing that's really counted out. There's a lot of maturity out there in terms of the technology that's available, in terms of managing quality of service over wide area networks with internet communications, XML, all that kind of stuff. There's plenty of technology available that can help you do that. It comes back, I suppose, eventually to the point that Simon was making about just because you've given some operational execution pieces to someone else doesn't mean you should outsource the architecture, outsource the strategy. You have to have a good overall picture of where you're going and why. And it's only then that you can really make sensible decisions about how you're going to put things in place to get the best value out of a kind of globally distributed organisation.
Okay, thank you. We've had a couple of good questions here about both cost and staff counts, head counts and redundancies. What kind of concerns do people have? I suppose, well, it's two questions really. First about change is potentially a cost up front. How do you justify that in economic times? And also change can potentially lead to loss of staff. So how do you reassure people about those two issues?
So I'll say it's good. They're very, very good points. But I really don't think they've got anything to do with SOA. SOA is absolutely a change forcing thing potentially, but the implications of that change are that if they're going to be negative, it's not because it's anything to do with SOA. It's because it's likely because there's some bigger problem that no one can do anything about. Business is tanking, or it may be more a problem of the image of the IT organisation, the overall image of IT as a provider of value. It's just been eroded and degraded, and therefore the other parts of the business just think of IT as a cost centre and will look for any reason to impose headcount cuts. And I think that's something that is above the level of SOA. That's about really how the IT organisation is fronted and managed in the context of other parts of the business. Now, there is a connection though, which is that I've seen in a number of organisations, a transformation using SOA has really elevated the status of the IT organisation, yes, and therefore put it in a better position if there is a difficult economic conversation to be had, to say, well look, we can clearly demonstrate we deliver these services and this is how they deliver value for these areas of the business. This is where these people work, how they contribute to these services. You've got that common language again, the service-oriented language that business and IT guys can use to have mutually interesting conversations. You can actually then start to attach costs and benefits in the context of that. And in some organisations, we've seen that to be very, very helpful in promoting the value that IT overall provides to the business. So SOA done right can improve the chances in difficult times. But
yeah, no, I agree. I think we're not doing this for the fun of it. We're doing it because the business needs to change, and we need to change the way we provide the functionality for the business. So the we fear change doesn't really wash. And I think we have seen surprisingly quickly what I would term reactive IT organisations become proactive, as Neil said earlier. Actually adding value to the business. So going from just a cost to a differentiator for the business. And what surprised me is, done half right. That's months, not years. People talk about a long return. I've seen 3 and 6 months IT departments change very quickly. And I think the other thing about the cost is, I said earlier, group the next 5, 6 projects that you know you're going to do in the next 9 to 12 months. Yes, the first project might cost you more because you've got to buy a BPM engine, but actually looking across the 5, you've actually made cost savings. So I don't think, again, that we've got to look years and years. I've seen business cases in months. And what surprised me is if you are business-led, I've seen returns in 3, 4, 5 months, especially when you're taking core broken processes and you're fixing them very quickly. And the other element I've seen coming out of a lot of these business cases has been information to management that just wasn't available. And it's hard to put a price on that, but actually changing things to make this information available very quickly.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, do you find there are particular projects or particular business sectors where it's best to begin, where, say, a particular business sector such as financial services, they benefit from it more because of compliance issues, or are there other sectors that are benefiting, or is it across the board? And how do you know if it works for you?
That's a really tough question, because almost every customer we go into is, whilst they're trying to achieve the same thing, do more with less and faster, they have different pain points. And I think the first mistake we started to make was looking for the perfect first project, the most burning issue. And sometimes that most burning issue is too big. We saw some energy providers take the home move process as their first process. Well, I don't know that much about utilities, but that must be the most complicated process in the organisation. Take meter replacement. If that's an issue, that's a bite-sized thing that you can actually get a return quite quickly on. So let's not look for the most burning issue. Let's look for something that is an issue, what I call a hotspot, and something that can be achieved in a matter of months, not years. So it's got to be important, but we don't want it to bring the business down if it's 2 weeks late.
I echo that really. I don't think there's any industry where I'd say, crikey, don't bother trying SOA there. I mean, you could argue about farming, maybe, or, but certainly I've seen organisations have a lot of success in financial services, insurance, telco, retail, healthcare, manufacturing, utilities, distribution. A lot of it is tied into process effectiveness. What's interesting about process improvement is that it's an evergreen issue, because in good times, organisations want to improve their processes because they want to steal a march on the competition. They want to enter a new market more quickly. They want to buy other companies and integrate them quickly. In bad times, people want to improve processes because they want to cut costs. They want to become more efficient. They want to improve customer intimacy. So I don't think there are very many places that are off limits. I said earlier, in terms of scenarios, one that seems to work very, very well is the kind of set of processes that sit around customer relationships. That's not CRM specifically as an application domain, but at the edge of the organisation where you're interacting with customers, from sales or support or marketing, those kinds of functions seem to be particularly interesting because of the speed of change and the efficiency and effectiveness focus.
Do you have some sort of simple examples perhaps you can give of specific sectors?
Yeah, sure. Certainly in retail, we've worked with customers who have had issues around some of their overriding processes. So purchasing processes where goods were being brought through a central hub and it was just taking too long, but they brought it through the hub because they didn't trust the processes. Now, once they've automated that process and they've actually looked at it and compiled it from reusable sub-processes, it gave them the confidence to actually bypass the distribution hub and ship direct to the countries, which is saving 2-3 weeks off of their procurement time. Now, they had a very rapid turnaround of goods, so that was a huge benefit to them. It's those types of things. So my advice would be, look for the broken elements of the process. And the acid test is always, if I fix that, does that give me competitive advantage? It might be 1 or 2 steps away, but we have to be led by competitive advantage. I don't know if you can think of any other examples off the top of your head.
Well, another great example, Telco. And one of the very sort of popular areas for consideration is provisioning. So more and more you've got telecoms companies, mobile providers, for example, wanting to provision not only just simple voice service on a handset, but provision voice, web access, some games, certain types of content, provision all of that in shorter and shorter timeframes, because that's a competitive aspect of a promise you make to a customer. It's a service promise. Buy this phone, it'll be live in an hour. You know, I remember when, not long ago, you bought a mobile and you couldn't do anything with it for a day. That's one area. Another area with Telco is billing and revenue assurance. That fraud can be a real issue, and tightening up on rating and billing and looking at call records, again through integrating systems. Service orientation seems to work pretty well there. You've got a lot of legacy systems. You can't throw them all away. You want a clean architectural approach to get rapid integration. That's another good example in Telco.
It's a big question. We could be here all day.
I think it's those real life examples though, where the example of retail that people can really relate to, and I think that helps them decide which projects are going to be best for them to identify. Okay, so going back to the top level issue again, one question about this idea that SOA is jargon. Just how finally would you sort of convince people that it's not jargon? How do you take away the jargon and make it something meaningful and real to the business? To
the business or to the skeptic?
To the skeptic in the business.
Right, well, I think the way to get around that is by not talking about SOA. So by, again, making it all business driven. So having a group of people who are able to take company strategy, assuming there is one. If there isn't one, we're in a whole other world of pain. If there is one, to take that and then have meaningful conversations about, well, how can we deliver functionality to support these initiatives in a way such that we can alter that functionality more quickly, we can recompose it and recombine functions so that you can deliver products and services in a smarter way, so that we can integrate systems more effectively. We've got a way of doing that. You don't need to know the technical details. We've got a way of doing that. It's proven in many, many examples. Yes, there are costs, but these are the benefits. You don't have to mention SOA, I don't think.
I think you're right. You're never going to convert the business to the religion of SOA. But if you explain things in that way, you'll get enough benefit of the doubt to go away and actually run some projects and try and deliver these benefits. And a key last takeaway is give yourself some KPIs, some measurements, because people are afraid to do it in case they fail. But I've seen many projects where the business has said, well, show us you've been successful. And unless they put these stakes in the ground, it's very hard to say, actually, you ask for this level of service and we've met it or exceeded it. So don't be afraid of measurement for these benefits.
Okay, lovely. That's great. Thank you very much for asking those questions. Really interesting issues there, and thanks for clarifying some of those points as well. Okay, that's all we've got time for the Q&A. So I would like to thank Neil and Simon for their time this afternoon. And I'd also like to thank you for spending an hour with us. I hope you found it useful. Sorry if we didn't get to answer your questions, but thank you for submitting them. One last thing is just if you could take 30 seconds or so just to fill in the feedback survey, that would be really useful for us. That's one of the tabs along the top of your screen. And really, it's just a question of saying that we've been talking today about IT for the integrated organisation and services-oriented architecture. I'd like to thank our panellists for their contributions. You've heard from Simon Wright at Oracle and Neil Ward-Dutton at MWD Advisors. Thank you all for attending this web seminar. We hope you found it informative. Don't miss the Next Computing web seminar on security in the modern business, which is on Thursday the 16th of February at 1500 hours GMT. You can register at computing.co.uk/events. Thank you very much and goodbye.